What is going on, guys? What does 1897, 1939, and 2012 all have in common? Well, if you are obsessed with cursed cinema, those might be your 3 opportunities throughout history to go insane from watching what is probably a 3-minute long, silent, black and white French film called The Fury of the Demon, allegedly created by a man named Victor Sicarius and possibly produced and directed by the famous George Miles of A Trip to the Moon and Haunted Castle fame. That is right. How is everyone doing? I am K-Ban and Kellum, and welcome to K-Ban and Kellum Presents, where today we are going to be talking about cursed films, one in particular, The Fury of the Demon. Let's get right on into it. Now, you see, back in the very late 1800s, silent film was becoming a thing. That is right. People were figuring out how to make movies, and hey, just like still today, we all love us a good movie. Movies were taking over. People loved them. They were short, they were sweet, and let me tell you, people could not get enough of them. And thanks to pioneers like George Miles, who realized that horror and sci-fi definitely had a strong place at the forefront of movies, we got some really interesting films. We really got to set the standard for modern-day horror. In George Miles' A Haunted Castle, for example, we got to see things like the devil transform into a bat and summon ghosts from a cauldron and all kind of crazy stuff like that. And like I said, it kind of set the pace. George Miles would have been considered somewhat of the Steven Spielberg or James Cameron of the turn of the 20th century. But there were also some creepy factors, like a man named Victor Sicarius and his so-called cursed film, Fury of the Demon. That is right. So it had 3 screenings, allegedly produced back in 1897 when it was first shown to a small audience in Paris, and caused people to freak the ever-living fuck out, to go into violent fits, riots, freakouts, and everything else in between. The film was later moved over to the United States over 40 years later in 1939 and shown in New York, where, once again, guys, you guessed it, it caused people to supposedly freak the fuck out. And then, way all the way up into the modern era, it was shown one more time at supposedly a secret film festival type thing in 2012, and this is where we get some interesting facts from, alleged witnesses who were there, who have said their piece and spoken all about it, because even in 2012, it supposedly caused people to, you guessed it, freak the fuck out once more. And since then, the film Fury of the Demon has disappeared from the public eye. So, one of the biggest rumors around this movie is that it is cursed by Victor Sicarius himself. We're going to get into all of that, so guys, stick around as we discuss everything you need to know and probably never really cared when it comes to A Fury of the Demon, the cursed horror film from the silent screen era of France. Now, this came to my attention. I read an article around Halloween back when, everybody's talking about creepy stuff. God, I love Halloween, right? And I got this article where it talked about Le Rage du Démon, which sounds so much better in French. Fury of the Demon is what that translates to in English. And everybody was saying that this movie freaked people out so bad that a documentary was produced around 2017, which supposedly covered the nuances of this film and is it really cursed and how would that work. So that does exist. You guys can seek that out. I'm sure it can be found somewhere on the internet. Fury of the Demon is also the name of the documentary, just like the film. Came out in 2017, and supposedly it's pretty cool. But what is The Fury of the Demon, and how did some probably 2.5 minute, 3 minute, because films back then were very, very short, how did it get this reputation that is still going strong today? So strong that, somebody would make a documentary about it over 100 years after it came out. Like, what could be hiding in there? Well, let's check out the rumors surrounding this creepy film from 1897. So first, let's do a little backstory. Let's talk about what this is. All right, so the rumors around it are that a man named Victor Sicarius, whose name I've said a couple of times here, was behind the writing of this film. Now, that is creepy because Victor Sicarius, who nobody even knows if the guy really truly existed or not, that's the other aspect of this, that nobody actually knows if there was really a Victor Sicarius. But word on the street goes into the fact that he was into really dark occult practices. And it almost gets kind of like a horror movie in itself, where people claim, historians that have researched him and such, claim that he went down into these secret bars. Hey, there's a good little name drop for you. He went down into these secret bars, in Paris at night, where they would drink blood from chalices on coffin-shaped tables. I mean, it was all very, very Hollywood, very Ninth Gate Johnny Depp level stuff. Very cool. And whether or not any of it's true or not, I mean, that's all up to debate, because, we're going back over 100 years. It's not like you can just go on to, Paris's, Department of Vital Statistics and look up this guy's birth certificate. It's not that simple. There are actually no known photos of his face, of Victor Sicarius' face anyway, except for this little picture of a man wearing one of those creepy, like, plague doctor looking masks, this could be anybody from any time, just doctored up to look creepy. That's the only photo that's really floating around out there, though, folks, that people claim might be him. All right, so he wanted to make a movie, and that movie, according to the legend, turned out to be Fury of the Demon. And he wanted to have this movie produced, and that's where George Miles kind of gets pulled into it. There's actually no real proof other than allegedly a similarity in the movie style from those who saw it. If people are not familiar with the George Miles style of movies, think about a rocket ship landing on the moon and sticking the moon right in the eye. If you've ever seen that little black and white clip, that was a George Miles movie. It was that really kind of grainy, almost like stop motion looking filming where, there's a lot of smoke poofs and things like that. His movies have been used in a few horror movies recently to kind of build atmosphere. If anybody saw The Babadook, there was a scene where a George Miles film was playing in that, and it was like creepy looking devil people dancing around with a lot of smoke poofing. So it kind of makes sense if you were this Victor Sicarius guy and you had a movie in your head that you wanted to get made. Just because you have the idea to make a movie does not mean you actually have the resources or the know-how or the money or the connections to get a movie made. It makes sense that he would have sought out, George Miles, because at that time he was like one of the premier directors in France. A lot of the rumors around Sicarius is that he was, a socialite, that he had money. So it would have been possible that he could have simply, had a contract drawn up and to get this movie made, and you'd go to the best, right, if you want to have it done. So that's about where the logic train ends here, and we get on into crazy land as we start talking about cursed movie that has made audiences lose their shit at 3 separate screenings spaced, decades and decades apart. Is it true? Did it really happen? Let's talk. So, the big thing is, yes, like I've already said, it supposedly drives people insane. Now, of course, since the movie's, over 100 years old, there's not a lot of people running around out there who saw it. However, a gentleman who identifies himself as Randy Wellington and claims that he was at the 2012 screening had this to say: "I've never seen anything like it. We weren't expecting the reaction to be so violent. People were screaming, they were shouting, they were trying to kill each other." That is from Mr. Wellington's account of the 2012 screening. That's what he says went down when they watched The Fury of the Demon. All right, it supposedly addles the viewer's memories. Another attendee of the 2012 screening, a man identified as Philippe Royer, he says, "I don't even know how I managed to get out of the theater. It's all a blur in my head. I can't figure out what happened." And of course, now you start looking at subject matter experts. We have a woman identified as a psychologist named Marie Helena Dash, who says everybody was affected by this hateful craze, which spread like a virus. So there you have 3 named witnesses from the 2012 event, and you start thinking, okay, maybe they got something going on here. You got a psychologist here putting her medical reputation out there to say, yeah, this movie makes you go nuts. That's when people start looking at this and going, man, could there be something to it? Of course, we've already talked a little bit about Victor Sicarius. Some people who have studied into him have described him as a Faustian character who frequented underground saloons where the drinks were served on coffins and was possibly responsible for the murder of a girlfriend before disappearing himself. So yeah, Sicarius is kind of a freak. Definitely the kind of person who would maybe curse the film if such a thing could be done. And of course, they link his so-called occult origins into the curse on the movie. That just adds an extra layer of, creepy factor, I suppose, to it all. So what exactly was on this movie, right? I mean, what was so crazy that when you watch this little short film, that on 3 separate occasions, it's driven a whole bunch of otherwise, normally functioning adults. What is it that could have made them snap? Well, there's not too much to say about it. These movies were really short. If you look up any of George Miles' movies to kind of get an example of what these, turn of the, 20th century, silent black and white films looked like, the George Miles films can kind of give you a good idea whether or not he was truly involved with the Fury of the Demon or not. It'll kind of give you an idea of what they would have seen. Anyway, from the few witnesses who were willing to speak on what they saw, what they describe is that it starts with a dancing red demon emerging from a coffin. Now, I'm sorry, that part kind of cracks me up a little bit. He was dancing as he emerged. The demon throws a woman in white into a cauldron. 2 more victims are thrown into the cauldron, and the demon stirs the pot with a pitchfork. There's an explosion. The spirits of the victims come flying out in the form of fireballs. They attack the demon, who curses them. I mean, I don't know how much more cursed. You've already thrown them into a pot, stirred them with a pitchfork, and turned them into fucking fireballs. How much more cursed do they need to be? And then I guess a crowd of angry townspeople bursts in to wherever this is taking place, and the demon turns them into monsters. And that's it. That's all we know of what actually went on in the Fury of the Demon film. Now, by our 2018 desensitized brains, that doesn't sound like anything scary. It sounds like a freaking cartoon. But you got to keep in mind, 1897, 1939, those were all very different times. People were a lot less desensitized. I guess they were sensitized at the time. And I mean, even in the United States, like in the 50s and 60s, when like a lot of the horror movies were coming out, people in the audiences did get freaked the fuck out by stuff that we would probably look at and laugh at nowadays. But, back then it was a new thing. It had never been seen. And if you want to kind of give a point of reference, I mean, just think about how like the Blair Witch Project, even as late as 1999, kind of affected a lot of us. Not so much in the fact that we were freaking out and rioting in the theaters, but it did introduce this new level of storytelling that had not really been seen in a very, very long time, to where people were going, holy shit, could this actually be real? I don't know. It definitely, it went a step further than even the, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like, based on a true story kind of element, because unlike that, where you're watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and you know it's fake, it could be based on a true story, but you also know that these are actors making a movie. Nobody's actually being hurt before your eyes. With the Blair Witch, you thought maybe, just maybe, these were the real victims of the Blair Witch. And so even then, even as late as 1999, we were still able to get somewhat affected by cinema beyond just taking it in as a movie. So just imagine going back to 1897, 1939, when, people really didn't know everything about movies. They were still this new thing. It is very possible that people saw this and just flipped out. And, one of the cool things that kind of went down with this is with the 1939 showing. Of course, like I've already said, there was allegedly riots that took place because people saw the film and lost their minds. There is a newspaper clipping, which I'll show you right here, from the New York Times, which does kind of corroborate the legend, I guess. It does, as you can see, it says, riot in a movie theater for the premiere. Viewers get mad at the Virginia while watching a French short movie. I mean, Fury the Demon would have been a French short movie. It was allegedly screened here at this time, so there is a possibility that a riot took place while watching this movie. That does kind of corroborate it. We do actually have witness testimony from a man identified as Maurice Goldberg, who said he was in the 1939 screening, and his quote on the matter is, "What an awful sight. People had gone mad, pulling their hair, fighting, tearing each other's clothes." That is supposedly from Mr. Goldberg, who was there in 1939. And after that, the rumors about it get kind of out there, the 2012 screening, and this is where I start looking at it almost like, this is when it really starts to slip outside of my suspension of disbelief. They say that this was originally presented to prove it wasn't a myth, the 2012 one. So you have a modern audience now, and some of the attendees from the 2012, we got some more quotes, say, I've never seen anything like it. It was crazy. And then another quote, after the 2012 screening, they say, "We didn't have to make people believe the film was cursed because I can tell you the truth of the matter, that film, it was cursed." We start to slip away a little bit more. Now they're saying that after the 2012 screening, the film itself disappeared, it vanished, nobody knows where it is. I start to have a hard time believing that. Anything this, controversial, any object like this, I feel like it would be kept under lock and key, and that kind of goes into the next piece of rumor, that there's a secret film library, kind of the movie Illuminati, if you will, where this movie may still be held. It's possible. It's very possible because, very wealthy collectors could very well be buying things like this. And if they did, they might not want people to know they had it. Absolutely. If you have something that is kind of a controversial item like this, people are going to want to see it. So if you're a collector and you collect movies, and you want your copy of The Rage of the Demon to stay your copy, you don't want people trying to buy it from you. You don't want people calling you all the time, begging you to watch it. It would make sense to kind of keep it a secret. That part, the fact that a private owner could have it, does make perfect sense. So, but beyond that, it vanishing and this, that, and the other, causing people to go crazy, I don't believe that. Let's talk about why. Now, like I said, I approach everything skeptically, but I keep an open mind to be proven wrong. So, hey, if anybody out there wants to tell me why this movie really is cursed, and I know this is like a super long shot, but if anybody out there thinks they actually have footage from the movie, oh my God, let's talk. But let's talk about why I don't buy into this curse thing. First of all, we go back to, the 1897 screening of this film. If, in fact, people who watched the movie were aware of Victor Sicarius's, alleged decadent lifestyle of devil worship and blood drinking from coffin-shaped tables, they would have probably already gone in with very preconceived notions that this movie was going to be something more than it ever really could be. They were going to think that it was going to be something insane, that it was going to be something so beyond anything they'd ever seen before, because this polarizing, terrifying figure was supposedly behind it. If you add in to the rumors that, George Miles was behind the production of it, let me tell you, George Miles was a natural showman. Before he got into movies, he was a traveling magician. And back then, if you wanted to make a name for yourself, you didn't have, Twitter and YouTube and Wikipedia and whatever else to help spread your name. You had to be out there spreading your name yourself. And people back then developed the ability to be those natural showmen. To walk into saloons, to walk into bars and other public gathering places and say, come one, come all, come see the great, whatever. And so if he was behind it and he was behind any of the promotion of it, he probably went out there and got people worked up about this movie before it was ever even shown. That would be something that would have been in a traveling magician's wheelhouse, of skills to get people worked up. So the 1897 screening, people may have already gone in there expecting to have their minds absolutely blown out the back of their brain boxes by this movie. So every little thing suddenly becomes heightened. Every bump, every boo, every dancing demon suddenly becomes 10 times more than it really is. And, it's kind of one of those things where if you tell somebody that there's something really awful, really terrifying waiting for them in the next room, they're going to go into that next room already freaked out, even though they have no idea if there really even is something in there or not. So that could have certainly kind of lended to this movie causing a larger reaction than it would have if it had simply been a cold opening, if people would have just been like, hey, come see this scary movie we made. You can definitely condition an audience in a whole lot of ways to see things, to expect things, to await things that are not ever even there. And I do believe that in this case that may have been what went down. The 1939 one, once again, if the reputation of this movie, followed it at all to the New York City movie theater, then it is quite possible that, people were once again expecting more than what was really there. Couple that with the fact that, even like I said, up into the 50s and 60s, audiences in the United States were still freaking the hell out over horror movies, fainting, leaving the theater, things like that, because it was kind of a sensory overload. They just weren't used to this kind of stuff. So if you factor that in, then yeah, once again, you're going to get those additional reactions. And let's also not forget the fact that these freak out riots based on the Fury of the Demon could also easily be the same kind of, they could still follow the same path as a typical bar fight that happens night after night all across the country, all across the world. If somebody in that movie theater got freaked out and stood up too quick or jumped or whatever and accidentally stepped on somebody's foot or knocked somebody's hat off or whatever, which could have caused that person to respond angrily, he throws his arms up and accidentally pops some big dude in the face. Big dude throws him down. And then before you know it, people are seeing this. Or it could have even been something as simple as somebody tripped and fell walking to their seat. And if you're going into this expecting a freak out, all it took is other people in the audience seeing that go down and go, oh my God, it's happening. The Fury of the Demon is happening. That person just fell down for no reason. And then everybody starts to freak the hell out. As far as the movie theater catching on fire or riot or, whatever was enough to get the newspaper to write up a little article about it, once again, well, you got to figure maybe it was a slow news day too. And a fight at the Virginia movie theater in New York was enough to make the front page of the New York Times. I don't know. Still, though, nothing in that convinces me that there was some kind of curse embedded into this film that caused people to do that. There are so many logical explanations. The 2012 screening, now this is just my opinion, completely my opinion. I'm not even 100% convinced that it happened. I say that only because I have such a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that nobody in 2012 would have bootlegged that motherfucker. I mean, yeah, they could have made people sign contracts at the door. They could have tried to seize cell phones or cameras. Yes, but people still always find a way. People find a way to record shit all the time. I mean, there's that famous recording of the Bohemian Grove out there at at the whole Skull and Bones Society and all that stuff. That's one of the most secret societies in our country, and yet somehow somebody was able to get out there and record one of their rituals. People find a way to do this. Bootleg films are all over the place, and I just find it really difficult to wrap my head around the fact that in 2012, this horrifying, polarizing, top secret movie, that nobody went in there and was able to bootleg something. Or some pictures, something would be floating around up there. The fact that nothing is, yes, there is a possibility. Like I said, this is just my opinion. There is a possibility that maybe the security at this place was just really on point. Maybe they really were that good at seizing cell phones or, getting people to sign non-disclosure agreements to where nobody wanted to test the waters. Maybe there were ushers standing on every road just to make sure nobody was fucking around. I don't know. It's very possible. But looking at the trends of how things are spread, how, videos are captured and spread around these days, I find it really hard to believe that an audience full of people, nobody tried to bootleg this shit. And the fact that you have these witnesses speaking in this 2017 documentary, that also kind of damages the non-disclosure agreement idea too, because if that were the case, I don't think they would even be talking about it. And of course, like I said, when it starts getting into the whole, like, the film's disappeared, or it's in some top secret Illuminati for movies, I don't buy into that. I do believe that a private collector could have it, if the film itself exists, but I don't believe that there's some kind of, secret movie Illuminati out there. I don't think there's a Vatican, blockbuster library, where they're just holding all these cursed films. It could exist, though. Like I said, once again, that's just my opinion, and that's my opinion based on the facts that I was able to gather while researching this topic. That does not mean that all of these things aren't 100% true, and that it couldn't have happened exactly as the rumors have it. All I can do is investigate the facts that are put in front of me and kind of form an opinion from there, and that's my opinion right now, that this would need a lot more looking into. I think what we have here, at least with the first two screenings, if they in fact even happened, is that there was some really brilliant, very early on, social engineering happening there. If you convince somebody that they're about to see something that is going to freak them the fuck out, they're going to be a lot more likely to fall into that. It's very, very easy. It's one of the oldest, forms of marketing and advertising in the world, and it's nothing new. There's nothing new about that. It still happens all the time to this very day. I mean, The Haunting of Hill House, whatever that new thing on Netflix is called. I think I fucked that title all up, but you guys know the movie I'm talking about. I started watching that because I read an article that said, they had to screen it during certain times since audiences couldn't make it through, the screening or the previews or whatever. And that definitely got me to click on that series. And it is a cool series. So, hey, I mean, it works. So, if George Miles or Victor Sicarius was walking around out there back in, the late 1800s saying, hey, you guys got to go see this movie, it is so freaky, then yes, I think people would go into it absolutely expecting a lot more, than was really going to be there, and their minds would kind of look. Once again, that goes into kind of audience conditioning, viewer conditioning. You can post a video on YouTube, and you can say, somebody records the cashier at McDonald's and says, McDonald's cashier steals my change or whatever. And whether or not the McDonald's cashier ever steals the change or not, it doesn't fucking matter, because the audience is going to be looking for that the entire time. They're going to be watching the cashier's hands, and every single time they move, they're going to be thinking, ooh, is that where the change got stolen? Nobody's going to actually stop and go, well, wait a minute, did this even happen? I mean, anybody can title a video anything. Is there any change theft even going on? No. Most people are just going to go in there waiting for the change theft to happen. And it doesn't even have to be something with a physical, indicator like that. You could just post a video, rude cashier at McDonald's. And the person could be completely delightful. People will still go into it the entire time looking for the rudeness. And a lot of people will find a way to find it. Whether it's there or not, they'll still go, oh yeah, I saw that part. She kind of smirked. That must be the rudeness. What a rude cashier. That's just audience conditioning. It happens. It happens on YouTube all the time, even till this day. So, yeah, I believe that the curse behind the Fury of the Demon could very well be the curse of viewer/audience conditioning. And then once a good little urban legend formed around it, it was easy enough to show it around. Even if there was a 2012 screening, people would have gone in expecting the worst. They would have gone in expecting to freak out. And like I said, all it might have taken was somebody tripping and falling as they were going to their seat, dropping their 42-ounce Coke, or maybe just sneezing. I don't know. All it would take, and one thing that does say, it spreads like a virus, and that's true. Panic absolutely spreads like a virus. And all it would have taken was one person in the audience to go, "Oh my God, it's happening. There it is. You hear that sneeze? That's a cursed sneeze if there ever was one. It must be going on." And then the anxiety kicks in, the apprehension kicks in. And before you know it, you got yourself a cursed film. So, I don't know. If anybody out there has any more information on A Fury of the Demon, or even some other so-called cursed films that might be floating around out there, let me know. I'd like to talk about it with you. Anyway, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. As always, here we go. This is the real cursed part of this video, where I ask you to please subscribe, like, comment, share, ring the bell. Head on over to Twitter at BanningK1979. If you would like to have your very own cursed Twitter account, click that follow button to be cursed with my awful shit posting. Anyway, guys, I really enjoyed making this one. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. My YouTube channel is still in a growing process, so if you would like to help it grow, by all means, like I said, please subscribe. Tell your friends. Hell, tell your enemies. I don't care. Anyway, you guys, have a great day. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll chat with y'all real soon.